Stunning sterling and artist prints, fabulous fashion and Navajo jewelry, war era memorabilia, and a swung vase like you've never seen before. Those are just some of the things that we're going to go into a deep dive on right now. Fun for everybody, and if you see something you really love, you might also end up owning it because we're listing all these items on eBay as we speak. And our first selection this time is this beautiful hibiscus bowl. This is by the Roycroft company, and Roycroft was known for these really glamorous, beautiful floral patterns, and they used a slip in a tube, in other words, clay, that they would use to outline the flowers, and that's why they have such great texture and depth. Hibiscus was brought out by William Roycroft. He was the one who started the company back in 1913. He had worked for a company called McIntyre and developed what they called Florian ware, which was this wonderful design and style. McIntyre did very well with it. His stuff was outselling all the other things that they made, and they decided that he was upstaging the rest of their product. And so they let go of him in 1912, and he promptly started his own company. And thank goodness he did, because over the next century, they made all sorts of incredible, beautiful wares. When you see the sticker there, that is the royal warrant, and it says it is from Queen Mary, because Queen Mary in 1928 thought Roycroft was so fine that she bought pieces for the royal house. And that was very important because if you got the royal warrant, everyone else in English high society decided that they needed to have some of your stuff too, keeping up with the royals after all. So that was a big deal, and it's not surprising because the ware is just so beautiful. It's so rich and deep. Now, the hibiscus line, William Roycroft came out with in 1949, and you see both the Roycroft stamp and the signature of William Roycroft. The Roycroft is the embossed stamp that you see there below the sticker. Then his son Walter took over the firm, and Walter changed the colors of this piece around 1960 and restyled it again in 1968. And you see where the colors and the style are really perfect for mid-century homes, and they're just a great match. They made this piece into the 1980s, and Roycroft was very successful until the last 10 years or so, when foreign competition finally seemed to have done them in. And it went into receivership, and the assets were sold, and another family member bought it and is restarting the factory, which is just great news because they make such wonderful things. And we've lost so many of the great Staffordshire potters, so it's wonderful to think that Roycroft will continue on. Will this piece be made ever again? Likely no. I suspect that they'll focus on a few of the lines that are today's populars, and this one, as beautiful as it is, has been out of production for a while, so we are proud to list this one on eBay now. You can see all the brush strokes in the paint. It's just really great quality. We're starting this at $49. They typically sell for about 3 times that. So we're going to put this out there and see where its new home will be. Our next piece is pottery as well, but this one is from Mexico. We have several really wonderful Mexican artisan pieces to show you in this flight, and this one is a company that you will see out there. It's a bit of a sleeper because it is signed Mara, and a lot of people do not realize that Mara, unfortunately, is no longer with us. She passed away in 2007. She has a daughter who has carried on and is producing some of her designs and has developed a line of new designs of her own. But Mara pieces are selling very well. People really like the artistry. She originally studied with Alfredo Zalce, who was a sculptor and engraver in Mexico during the Muralist era. The Muralist era is the very important period in the mid-1900s, the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, where people like Diego Rivera created such wonderful murals that had a lot to do with the plight of the people and what people were going through in Mexico at the time. Then she went to Italy and worked with Bruno Terese in the Italian ceramic industry, and she learned about studio production of stoneware there. That's what this is. It's a white clay stoneware, and the quality is just really good. She developed her schematic and very precise line drawing style, a very singular style that is very popular now. This one with the women and the crazy hair was designed by her in Morelia, but all of the production was done in Tlaquepaque, which is one of the two famous pottery towns right outside of Guadalajara, the other one being Tonalá, which a lot of us are familiar with. So Mara is definitely something to look for. This mug, we're starting at $9.99. They typically sell for $20 and up just for the mugs, and some of her larger pieces are selling in the hundreds of dollar range now. Our next couple of items also have a tale to tell, but it's a tale of life during wartime, because the first one here we have is a wonderful Chelsea bell clock. And these are ship clocks. Originally, the Chelsea company started making these maritime clocks for ships around 1900, and the U.S. Navy ordered a whole bunch for the Great White Fleet. They became very popular for home use as well, so you will see a lot of brass-surrounded Chelsea bell clocks. But in World War II, the U.S. Maritime Commission, who started in the 30s as a shipbuilding arm of the U.S. government, became really active with helping build the Liberty ships and the Victory ships to replace the ships that had been lost from the maritime fleet as a result of war, because they needed war materials to be sailed over to Europe and to Asia. So they made about 3,000 ships that would have had this clock, and because of metal restrictions, they converted it to a Bakelite case. So it is the Chelsea ship's bell clock. It says Chelsea Clock Company, Boston on it, but it is the U.S. Maritime Commission version. Chelsea was so proud of these clocks that when the war was over and they started scrapping the Victory ships, Chelsea said, "We will buy every one of them back from you because we know they're good quality and we can sell them again." Well, a lot of them were scrapped. Some of the ships became museum ships. Some of the ships were sold to the Philippines and other governments to be used in their fleets. And so not all of these came home. So there's something like a couple thousand of these that might be in existence. If you put the serial number of this one, which is shown on the back, into an email and send it to the Chelsea Clock Company, they will actually be able to tell you which ship this was on and give you its entire history. They have kept a registry that long because they are very proud of the work that they did. They obviously quit making these clocks when the U.S. Maritime Commission stopped commissioning ships around 1950. This one has the original key. It does work. It works great and keeps really good time. These typically sell for around $225, and we do have a buy it now of that amount, but we're starting it at $49.99. Now, the way it works, because I've had a few people who've seen these videos and they say, "Oh, I went in and it's already been bid. Can't I buy it now?" Well, once there's a bid, the buy it now goes away. That's how eBay works. So if you want first dibs on these things, the best way to do it is to become a level 2 or 3 member on this channel or on Patreon, because those folks get early access to this video as part of the rewards for supporting the channel with membership. But if you don't, that's okay, because you still will get to see these videos and you might still have a chance to bid on these pieces. All of these items are going on eBay right now, and you can click the links in the description of this video to see the items. Another American company with a history linked to the U.S. Navy is this, the Electric Boat Company. And this fellow is watching a ship go by, but this card deck, which was made in World War II, and you see it's advertising Electric Boat Company submarines. This was specifically made for people aboard submarines. It is your typical bridge size. But what's significant about it is what it says here. It is the special submarine deck. The heart and diamond suits in the red have been specially printed for high visibility when players are wearing red adaptation goggles used aboard U.S. submarines. And you can use it for ordinary conditions as well. And so they look a little different. It's a really interesting deck, and this is not something that you see very often. Of course, if you're in submarines, a lot of times they have to run with just the red lights on because they're trying to avoid detection. And so that is why you see these special outlines and the extra heart on the heart suit. And in the case of the diamonds, you see the same. And you also notice it's sort of an orangey color. It's not exactly a true red like you usually see on card decks. And that was deliberate because they had to be able to see it with those goggles on. There were lots of things that were printed for these ships and had to be done in this manner as well. So it was a technology that developed along with submarines, and submarines developed because of the Electric Boat Company. They started building them in 1900 in Groton, Connecticut, and the Navy said, wow, that's a pretty big deal. We need to order some of these. And they ordered a bunch during the First World War, and they ordered a bunch during the Second World War. This deck is complete with the Ace of Spades, which also has the special red treatment, and the Joker, which has the special red treatment. So all the cards are there. The condition is good. It doesn't look like it was played with hard. And it's a very dramatic, patriotic scene. Now, I haven't seen one of these sell in recent times. My understanding is that they're worth around the $50 range. We're going to just start this at $9.99 and see where it goes. It's an interesting story, and you've noticed I've come into a large collection of playing card decks, and I just got a whole bunch more. So I've been picking through and finding the most interesting ones because the history of playing cards turns out to be full of interesting examples like this. And now we go from World War to world peace and a World's Fair, a very important World's Fair that a fair number of Americans went to see, but a whole lot of people in Europe did. This was the second most attended World Fair in history in 1958 in Brussels, Belgium. Brussels had actually had 5 World's Fairs before, and so they knew how to host, and that's why they won the bid to have the first World's Fair after World War II. This is being sold as a lot, these 4 pieces. This particular piece is a really cool tray, and I thought, wow, this is something really different. So see all the different countries in the world, the Atlantic Ocean, they show the trade routes, and they show the World's Fair logo from Brussels. It is made of copper. It's in pretty good overall shape, a few little dents from use, just solid on the back, no marks of any sort. These other pieces I decided to add with it to give it a little bit more perspective, and so that for those of us who love World's Fairs but haven't been familiar with this one, you get a little picture of the whole thing. The first one here shows the atomium, and the atomium was the big sculpture based on a giant enlargement of an atom molecule, because the Brussels World's Fair was all about innovation and looking to the future, and also celebrating the recovery of Europe from the Second World War. So they got a scale rendering of it. This was built to be a temporary structure, and it was so popular that they kept it in Brussels, and it is still there to this day. It was completely made of stainless steel, so it was a material that was built to last, thankfully, and it has, and it's just a really fascinating thing. It is the Brussels version of the Eiffel Tower or the Space Needle, another wonderful structure left over from a World's Fair that is a great attraction and a symbol of the city to this day. Then we have this map from Esso. It's a map of the World's Fair, all of the different pavilions. This was the first post-war fair, and the first post-war fair where both the USSR and the USA had a pavilion, so competing ideas about the future of the world there. It's in good shape overall. There are a few little holes in the fold line along the cover here. And then the last part, which is really fun, if you have a Viewmaster, you can look at these reels and take a walk through the entire thing and get a real feel for what it was like to be there. As is typical with Viewmaster reel sets, there are 3 reels and a flyer about all the other Viewmaster reels you can get. And look at that 1950s haircut that she has. All sorts of wonderful scenes. The Pavilion of Canada is featured on this one, along with the US. This one shows the view from the top of the atomium, which was 360 feet high. And this one shows the Belgian pavilions, amongst other things. It's just so much fun for me to get to present this view of the World's Fair and this view of the world at that time. And we're going to start this whole set off for just $9.99. It is the whole lot of 4 items together, and we will see where in the world it goes now. World's Fairs love to show the modern inventions of their day, and modern inventions and tastes change generation to generation. And one person who understood that really well was this man, Brooks Stevens. He was one of the greatest industrial designers that America has ever known. And you might not know him by name, but you might know him by some of the wonderful things he designed. Everything from fantastic streamlined cranes to the Studebaker Hawk and the Jeepster. And this piece here, Brooks Stevens got the commission to do this design right before 1940 for Petit Point. This is a Petit Point iron, and these are very collectible. He wanted it to look like it was in flight. And so you have this wonderful streamlined Art Deco design, and you also have this rather unique back end here. This would tip off so that you could put it down and do little corners and have a surface on the iron that wasn't part of the flat surface. So it was really quite innovative. He was really big on form following function, but he was also the person who invented the term planned obsolescence, because he understood that tastes change and that people want novelty and what's new and fresh. And that as wonderful as this style was, he knew that this style in a few years would be changed because technology would change and personal taste would change. This iron is very heavy compared to irons that we use nowadays, but it had some really great features like this wing here that would allow enough air to get in that it would help cool the iron and allow it to breathe. And that meant that you didn't have to use steam to press the clothes. It was really a great design. This one still works. You can tell it was used for a while, and you could use it for the rest of your life, I think, because it is so well made. You don't see a whole lot of these days, and it's not because they weren't made to last. It's because, as Brooks Stevens predicted, styles changed and people wanted something else. Irons got lighter, they were made of plastic, new materials came along, and so a lot of people got rid of these. Some were sent off to scrap drives during various wars. Some were melted down for the metal in the 1970s when the prices of metal got high. So we don't see a ton of these anymore. And this one is a really good example of its type. We're going to start this one at $49. I've seen closing prices as high as $125, but the likelihood is if you end up with this iron, you'll never need another one. Brooks Stevens was fond of saying that you needed to be a business person and an engineer first to be a good designer, and that the design came from those other factors. That's why designers like him were trained in engineering. And in the old days before computer-assisted design, they would use sets like this with lots of compasses and dividers and other tools to help make blueprints and renderings and other designs. This one is by Koeffel and Esser. Koeffel and Esser were German emigres who came to the United States and set up a shop in New York specifically to do drafting sets like this. They ultimately did slide rules and all sorts of other things that were very important, and they were a very successful concern right up until computers came along. And by the 1980s, they were going out of business. But in its day, this was a must-have. I remember my father had a set like this when he was a professional engineer in the 1970s. This set heralds from probably about 1930. It came from the estate of a Boeing engineer here in Seattle. So we see a lot of these there. You see these fairly commonly. You don't usually see them as extensive as this, though, and with everything in them. A lot of times parts are missing. So there is a collector for this sort of thing. A more modest set might sell for as little as $20 or $30, but these larger sets may sell for as high as $75 to $100, and we're going to find out together right now, because we're going to put this online and see who thinks this would be a fun display or something interesting to use. There are some people who really are trying to preserve the old ways of doing things, and this has all the pieces you need to do it. Well, Vintage Housewares are indeed collectible, and our next one comes from a very unlikely source, and that is Avon Calling. Avon Calling, of course, was the tagline for the advertisements for Avon ladies, as they were called when I was a child. Avon is actually one of the largest supporters of women entrepreneurs to this day. And they have done that throughout their entire history. They started in 1886 when a door-to-door book salesman started giving perfume to the people who ordered from him. And that man, David McConnell, figured out pretty quickly that the perfume was doing better than the books. He decided to start making perfume with a business partner. Well, his business partner was in California. So even though he was in Manhattan, he started the California Perfume Company. And the first thing he realized was that a lot of women in the 1880s did not have a way to have a career, and yet they understood the product better than the men did. And so he hired a woman by the name of Mrs. Albee, and she was the first Avon lady. And he proceeded to develop an entire company based on the notion that women selling to women is a great business model. It was very ahead of its time. This box set, which includes this really attractive cake server, came with all the ingredients you needed to make a cake, because at that point, Avon had come out with this line called Perfection. And the Perfection line included a recipe book and all of the things that you needed, which you could get from Avon to make all sorts of wonderful things like cookies and cake. There is the cake that you were to make to put in this cake stand. And everything was included. Perfection baking powder, a box of vanilla, a box of almond extract, imitation maple flavor, lemon extract, imitation black walnut flavor, and a complete set of food coloring. And what's great about this set is it is all in there because this has never been used. This set was a saleswoman sample, and we even have her card. This is Mrs. Grace Cuttle of Ravenna Boulevard in Seattle. And she was the Avon representative. This is from about 1950. It is a 6-digit phone number before they went to 7 digits. It is just so fun to me that we have her business card and her entire sample completely unused in the original box. And the bottom of the cake pan has the Avon Perfection logo in it. I think this is just the neatest set, and what a beautiful cake pan. I've never seen this set complete before, and I have not seen another one on eBay. And as I'm fond of saying, if you're going to sell something, it's great if you have the best one, the cheapest one, or the only one. This one is in perfect condition, so it is not just the best one, but it is the only one that I've seen out there. And I think somebody is going to really get a kick out of this. We're going to put it out for just $9.99. I'm not putting a buy it now on this one because when I have something that hasn't sold recently on eBay, this is a great opportunity to test the market and see what the value of these things is in an open market during a 10-day auction. So we're going to find that out right now. David McConnell really understood the psychology of empowering women through business to become entrepreneurs and more self-reliant. Another person who understood psychology and understood that it was being talked over the heads of average people who could benefit from it was Paul Gillette. He was one of a number of people in the late 1960s who strove to make psychological information available to lay people without the technical jargon and without the fear that caused a lot of people not to seek mental wellness back in the day when being found to be going to a psychologist could be the death knell of your career or your relationship. And so to help normalize it, publications like this came to be. This is Popular Psychology, Volume 1, Number 1 from 1967. And Paul Gillette talks in the foreword about how his hope is to take these studies and this information that professionals in the business are reading and make it understandable to people like you and me so that we can have a better mental wellness. I love the Rorschach clock on the front cover, and that is a lot of the attraction for publications like this to collectors today. And the fact that this is the first of this publication makes it more desirable than later editions. It has some really interesting articles about how stress and depression affect your income, your appearance, your love, your power, your lifespan. Is mental illness a myth? These are things that were being discussed at that time. There's bonuses like what happens when you sleep, which is kind of fascinating. I actually spent a little time reading that one. There's also something that is meant to be humorous, making fun of some studies of the day, but you have to take it in the spirit in which it was intended as a joke because it's called 51 New Ways to Kill Yourself, paraphrasing paragraphs out of studies that they clearly are mocking, like one that says that If you're bald, you're more likely to be sickly. Or if you eat too many carrots, it will paralyze your nervous system. Did you know that? I've never heard that. So more cups of coffee a day can mutate your chromosomes. Maleness increases your chance of tuberculosis. Sorry, guys. And my favorite one, wearing miniskirts can lead to rheumatism. These are all from studies that were being done in the 1960s. And so part of the idea behind this magazine was to debunk myths about things that were purported to be absolute truths that were half-baked, and to instead replace it with information that you could actually use. Psychology Today ended up being the one that lasted and is still available in magazine and online. But this one lasted for a while, and it also has some great graphics for advertising. There's a reel-to-reel stereo on the back, and all of these almost brand new cars that you could buy for wholesale. 65 and 6 Chevys and Plymouths and Dodges. So it's actually a fun read. It's a great graphic. And those are the things that I think will make it interesting to a collector. We're going to start this one at $9.99. Some of these old psychology magazines do sell for $20, $30, $40. I haven't seen this one listed, but I just think something about it, the graphics or the articles, something in it will be appealing to someone, and we will see if it finds a new home. Some people seek to solve their psychological problems through reading articles and studying and being in their head. Other people just buy jewelry. And we have some really beautiful pieces of jewelry here. This one is Navajo. This is Ida McCrae. Ida McCrae worked in the Four Corners area in the 1970s. Not a lot is known about Ida McCrae. She was one of the earlier ones who signed her work. I really like the stones in this. It's always a matter of personal taste, but this one doesn't have a lot of matrix. It just has a little bit of the black. And I like the conchos and the use of the feathers. Navajo jewelry making was really influenced a lot by the Spanish. We really don't see a lot of Navajo jewelry being made before about 1870. At that point, they start to do a lot of things by hand. And so they get the metal tools and they are inscribing the leaves by hand. And the reason for that is at that time, the Navajo were still nomadic, whereas Hopi jewelry and Zuni jewelry, you see more cut stones because they could get lapidary devices and they were staying in one place. The Navajo were still traveling place to place, and that's why you typically see raw stones in their natural form and the silver is formed around them, which gives it a very specific design quality that people are really liking nowadays. A lot of people don't recognize the Ida McCrae mark because it simply says Ida M. You really have to do some research to find out that McCrae was her last name. It does have the sterling mark. We don't see a lot of marked pieces before around this time. In the 1970s, there starts being real appreciation of this beyond just the people who had caught on early and were trading in the pawn shops. And that's when we start seeing studios forming and people starting to take credit for their work and sign their work. So it's a real shift in the market at that time. And there are a lot of people who collect for designers. Conchos, of course, are a form that derive from the Spanish, but the feathers have relationship to the Navajo spiritual beliefs of things coming down from the heavens to the people. I find this really nicely balanced. It has just enough stone and just enough silver and just enough to design to wear really well without being heavy and having a lot of points like a squash blossom would do. This one is 16 inches plus a pendant that's about 2 3/4 inches long, including the feather drop. And it's very delicately done. Later pieces are done with molds rather than the hand tooling, and I think this one has a combination of both. From what I can tell, I believe the surrounds around the stones have to be done individually because the stones are unique shapes, and the feathers and conchos, I believe, are actually done through some sort of casting by this era. The silver crafting is really nicely done. I think it's a very stylish piece. We are starting this at $95. I believe pieces like this typically are selling in the $150 to $175 range now. And I'll be curious to see who gets this because I think it's going to look really good on. The other piece I have is this piece. Now, this one is older, channel set turquoise. It's a very pretty cuff. I like that it's very straightforward and simple. It's thin enough for a woman to wear, but it's a straightforward design that a man could wear as well. And it fits my wrist, which means it's about 6 to 6.5 inches. I think the turquoise is very nice. It's very pure. They're small pieces, but it definitely has an effect set all in a row. And this is before studios, so this is something that would have been sold through the pawn shops. It does not have a pawn ticket, but this is still of the era where they were not being sold in studios and they were not signed individually. And of course, the pieces from that era were not marked sterling either. It was just assumed that you would know it was sterling. And unlike jewelry makers elsewhere, it was not a requirement among the Navajo jewelers to mark things sterling. Nowadays they do, of course, because that's something that is a selling point. This piece is starting at $59. I didn't put a buy it now on this piece because it is possible that somebody who has more scholarship in this area than I do will recognize that it's a particular designer or from a particular mine. The people who are really in the know can look at those stones and oftentimes tell which mines the turquoise came from, and that can have an effect on value. So I'm going to let the market educate us on this piece, but I think it's very nicely done and very subtle and would look really great with other cuffs on a wrist. On the subject of studios, one of the most famous studios in the United States was that of Elbert Hubbard, who started the Roycroft studio in New York and really set design and philosophy on their heads in the arts and crafts era. They started in 1895. He came to believe that withdrawing from industrial society and going back to a medievalist idea of guilds and handworking was the way for people to succeed and for society to get away from some of the really negative things that were happening during industrialization, working conditions, quality of merchandise, and there began to be a reaction against it. And that reaction led to the arts and crafts movement, so named because the idea was that you should practice art in your craft and you should make things by hand, and that there was something about the old ways that was better. Elbert Hubbard had started as a salesperson for Larkin Soap door to door, and he was the guy who came up with the idea of giving premiums with the purchases, and some of the premiums were books. And that led him to the notion of printing books. So originally, book printing was one of his main things, although ultimately the Roycrofters did everything from furniture to pottery to hammered copper, all of which is very collectible today. This is the cover without dust jacket in this series, Selected Writings of Hubbard. This one is based on some of his pamphlets. This is volume 1. You can see the wonderful gilding and the Roycrofters symbol at the bottom. A lot of the Roycroft art colony is still there in East Aurora, New York. 14 buildings are preserved as a historic monument. The Roycroft Society continued for many years afterwards with his son in charge, and in 1928 they did this 14-volume set of various writings. And I have all 14. Only volume 1 does not have its dust jacket. It's in wonderful condition. There's a tip-in of Mr. Hubbard in his prime and a color rendering of the Roycroft shop at the time. And because they were done in very small numbers, they could be ordered and personalized. So this one was done for FEC Divine. And of course, they're beautifully made with gilding and with a fabric bookmark that is built into the book. He was a really interesting person with a lot of interesting things to say and quite prolific. This one is called Philistia. This one's called On My Way. His most famous quote, which was his and is often misattributed to Aristotle, was "Do nothing, be nothing, say nothing, and you'll never be criticized." And his point was, I am going to speak, I am going to say something, I am going to do something, and let the chips fall where they may. A very influential and interesting person at his time. You can read all about it in his selected writings. We have the entire set. Only number 1 is missing its dust jacket, although it's kind of nice because you get to see this wonderful cover in true arts and crafts style. And we are starting this set at $49. They typically sell for about $150 plus shipping, in a store usually for around $225. I do have a box they fit in very well that is not terribly large. It will be rather heavy. We do not send books media mail because we can't insure and track them effectively that way. But the shipping shouldn't be too horrible because we have a box that contains the whole set pretty nicely. So the dimensions are not too big, even though the weight will probably be around 20 pounds. Now, studio production is not limited to the United States of America. And in fact, the studio ethos has spread to countries all over the place, including the country of Mexico, where this amazing sterling and malachite trophy vase was made by a gentleman by the name of Ezekiel Tapia. And Ezekiel Tapia was from a family of silversmiths in Taxco, Taxco being the silver mining and production center in Mexico, very famous for jewelry by designers like William Spratling and Margot de Taxco and others. But tableware and vessels also have been made in Taxco for many, many centuries. And this is a particularly gorgeous one, in my opinion. This is a big, heavy piece of silver. It's approximately 3 pounds of sterling silver plus a pound of malachite and onyx in the base. And there is the Ezekiel Tapia signature and the 925 for sterling. Tapia said, "I like to create pieces that cause amazement for those who see them." And wow, I have to say, I thought this was really amazing. It is tarnished. I actually like the tarnish and the darkness, and I had decided to sell it this way and allow whoever buys it to decide whether they prefer this or if they want to shine it up to as shiny silver as it would have been presented new. Ezekiel Tapia recently turned 90 years old, so he is not really producing at this point in time, but he produced for many years, starting in his late childhood because he worked alongside with his father. His father was a lapidarist, and so Ezekiel became interested in stone. And then his father got into sculpture right about the time that Tapia came back from engineering school. So with the combination of his engineering prowess, his father's exposing him to lapidary art, and his own personal interest in desert plants, which this is loosely based on, Mexican native and indigenous cultures, and in mid-century modernism in design, which he was also steeped in, he came up with some really unique designs like this one that have elements of all of those things in them. And I think it's just gorgeous. It's also a lot of sterling silver. And of course, sterling silver has become very expensive of late. And so just the intrinsic value of this alone is probably somewhere in the $1,950 range, which is what our reserve price is on this. I believe it has value beyond that because of its artistic value. We'll see what the marketplace thinks. There is the original silver. You can see the hand hammering and the nature of the design and the way that it's done. I just think it's a really incredible piece. It's quite large. It's 8.5 inches high by 11.5 wide at the handles. It is called Vasija Tarasca, or Tarascan vessel, and this is its original certificate of authenticity. We are starting this at $9.99, but we do have a reserve on this piece because it is obviously an object of beauty and value, and it is something that I am willing to wait to sell if it doesn't go for as much as it should, but I have a hunch it will. I have to stand back to show you this piece because it's rather large. This is also from Mexico. This is by Jose Luis Cuevas, and this is a limited edition lithograph by this very famous and now departed Mexican artist. This is dated 1991. It does have its certificate of authenticity as well, and it is called Washington Square. It's based on pen and ink drawings by Cuevas. Cuevas is a very interesting artist. He was one of the breakaway generation of mid-century artists in Mexico. He broke away from the muralist tradition that was so strong there. His influences were Goya, Picasso, and Orozco, as opposed to Diego Rivera and the muralist. He was more interested in displays that evoked emotions of desperation based on dystopic images. And that had a bit to do with his own personal history. He was a prodigy. He started drawing when he was 4 years old. He was discovered at the age of 10. He was sent to study art at the National School of Painting and Sculpture, but at age 12, he developed rheumatic fever and dropped out and almost died and was a bit of a hypochondriac. He actually lived to be 83, but he was always convinced in his early years that he did not have long to live. So at age 14, he rented and started his own studio, sold illustrations, and went to visit a brother who worked at an insane asylum. And that experience, seeing people who were desperate and in disarray, really influenced his work. He did a lot of drawing when he was visiting his brother, and it really led him to a style and form of art that has become rather popular in contemporary art, as you can see here. And I think it's a very fascinating image, and the fact that it's a group of images in one print makes it just really visually different. He is a well-known listed artist. We are starting this at $9.99. We do have a reserve of this of $495 because based on comparable sales, that is not an unrealistic price for this piece. There is a museum dedicated to Cuevas in Mexico City, and he is no longer with us, and interest in his work and values of his work have been appreciating markedly. I've been selling a collection of letter openers for the last several months, and this one is a really pretty one done in the 1970s in a modernist style, but using a mercury dime as the decoration. And the mercury dime means this might be something that a coin collector would enjoy. This group of items has a lot of impressive things by artists and sculptors, and this was another impressive sculptor by the name of A. Weinman. Weinman designed the mercury dime in 1916. There was a contest to replace the barber dime, and Weinman won. He was famous already because the year before he displayed a wonderful bronze at the 1915 San Francisco World's Fair called Descending Night. And this has some echoes of that wonderful Art Nouveau piece. This was called a Mercury dime because of the wings in her hair, which is a little bit of a misnomer because Mercury's feet were winged. This is actually a Phrygian cap, and it had wings attached, and people confuse that, and so Mercury dime became the common name and is still the name used by collectors of this style. The face was actually modeled after his upstairs neighbor, and his upstairs neighbor happened to be a woman named Elsie Stevens Wallace, the wife of a very popular poet of the era. She was considered quite a beauty in her time, and her likeness exists to this day in the form of millions and millions of mercury dimes that were made from 1916 until 1945. This is in good shape. There's minor corrosion on the blade. It's straight and not bent. The wood is in good condition. It'd just be a handsome piece for somebody to enjoy, and we're starting it at just $9.99. We do have a buy it now of $25. If you're over a certain age, you might have had Buster Brown shoes and be familiar with this guy. This is Buster Brown and his dog Tige, and Tige looks pretty fearsome there. But Buster Brown was a very famous cartoon character and advertising character early on. Richard O'Call had designed a comic called The Yellow Kid, which was, I believe, the first serialized comic in the United States. In 1902, he drew Buster Brown and started a cartoon based on he and his faithful dog. In 1904, the Brown Shoe Company said, hey, that would make a great logo for us. And so they licensed him and used him as their logo for pretty much the rest of their history. This was a hook that was given out to kids. The Vacation Days Carnival was some sort of a promotion to get kids' parents in to buy shoes for back to school. And the kid would be given this hook they could hang on the wall, ostensibly to hang their shoes on, but more likely to use for notes or clothes or ties. Buster Brown always looks like he has a black eye to me, and I think there is a story about that. But Buster Brown as a cartoon was out of the papers long before I was a kid. However, he was not out of the shoe store. This lasted as a logo for a long, long time. This particular advertising piece is celluloid over a printed stock. It has a date on the edge, 1946. This one is in good condition. There is a little bit of yellowing around the edges here, which is kind of normal with buttons of this type. It's in good shape. It's a fun piece for somebody who likes vintage advertising or vintage childhood things. And who knows, you might even have a use for it. We're starting it at just $9.99. We have a buy it now of $15 on it. Some of that original generation of kids wearing Buster Brown shoes grew up to have a different kind of fun, and they joined the organization that built this hall. This is a Shriner's mug from the 1933 Imperial Council session. These were given out to people who were there to see the new imperial potentate be sworn in. It was the 59th such gathering. These started in the mid-1870s. You see, this was the Crescent Temple. This was the host, and people from all over the country came. Even though it was the depths of the Depression and times were very hard, they still drew 15,000 people, and all of them paraded down the boardwalk. That was one of the big events. The mayor of Atlantic City came to meet them. They pulled in 91 Pullman train cars so that there would be enough places for people to stay, because even though Atlantic City was a big hotel district, there were not enough rooms for all of them. And also, it was the Depression, and a lot of people didn't have a lot of money to stay in a hotel, so they made the railroad cars and dining cars available to them and parked them in the train yard. There was a big circus involved. 3 piers birthed 26 yachts and took people out on fishing expeditions and all sorts of fun. So it was a great 5 days in the middle of July in a very, very difficult year. And we know it was a difficult year because the company that made this mug was Lenox China. Lenox China was based in New Jersey, and this is their blue mark they used up until 1952. And Lenox did not do a lot of advertising stuff, but because this was a New Jersey event and it was the middle of the Depression, making 15,000 of anything was a really, really good production run for them. Now, I doubt, in fact, that they made 15,000 because not everybody would have been able to afford this, but there were probably 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 made, somewhere in that realm. You do see them from time to time. I'd never owned one before. The quality is great because it's Lenox China. It is definitely a step above your usual cafe ware, although it is weighty like restaurant ware. And I think it's a really cool piece. It's got the transfer of the temple. The temple was designed by the architect Shell Lewis. This building now sits abandoned in Atlantic City, although they did put money in the roof. So apparently they are trying to preserve the building, but it is not occupied and has not been for a number of years. Maybe someone should open a big antique mall there. If you are a collector of Masonic or shrine-related items, this is really fun. The Shriners are a branch of the Masons. All Shriners are Masons, not all Masons are Shriners. The Shriners are really the fun-focused arm of the Masons. And this is a fun piece. So we're starting this at $9.99. We have a buy it now of $69 on it because they do sell for as much as that, and I see them listed even higher. But we'll just let this one go and see where it ends. Well, you know me in hats, so I got to put it on. This floppy chapeau is a Christian Dior. This is the Norma style. It is velvet. It is black. And it poofs up very nicely if you want it to, or you can wear it flat. So it's a pretty versatile piece. And of course, it has the Christian Dior label. Chapeau, Paris, New York. Christian Dior, hats were his first thing. Before he ever had his own fashion house, he was a milliner. He designed hats and sold illustrations of hats to various houses in Paris. That's what got him started and got his reputation in the 1930s. When he launched his haute couture company, he insisted on designing hats, not as accessories, but as part of the outfit. And to this day, Christian Dior is the only haute couture company that makes hats as a regular part of its line. Now, they do sell them as accessories, but again, they do design them with the idea that they are part of an outfit. They've had a number of designers. Currently, Stephen Jones, for the last 30 years, has been their milliner. He did a large exhibit in 2020 of Christian Dior hats over the years that was quite well received in Paris. I believe that Gianfranco Ferré was the one who designed this particular piece. It's in excellent condition. It's a 7.5-inch opening. and 12 inches around to the edge of the brim. It's just soft and sweet. We're starting this at just $9.99. Our buy it now is $79 because they do sell for that price. We are getting to the time of year where people wear hats, and black is a good color at the holidays. So I think the timing for this to be on someone else's head in this season is good. We'll see who appreciates the Christian Dior brand name and style. Now, those of you who watch me on the Antique Nomad Life channel have seen this piece before, but it is time for it to go to a new owner. And it is rather spectacular, speaking of fashion, because it is this wonderful Toquaro Mexican costume. This one is just a top with fringe and all the sequining, with the skull on the front and the bat on the reverse. We will insert a picture because there's just no way we can do justice to this beautiful, beautiful handmade garment. The story behind these is that they are done for the Festival of Los Negritos, which is part of Candlemas, or Candelaria, as they call it in Mexico. And for those who are of the Catholic faith, you will understand that that is the day that they celebrate the presentation of Jesus as a baby to the church, similar to what we would call a christening these days. Before the christening of Jesus, the notion was that he was still at the risk of being consumed by the little black creatures, the demons, the devils, the evil spirits. And so Candelaria is very important. They have a festival celebrating Los Negritos. They make amazing, fantastic, gargoyle-ish masks done by the men who carve, and the women make these wonderful costumes to go with them. All hand done, loads of sequins, wonderful soft fabric. It's actually surprisingly comfortable to wear and not terribly heavy, but just a beautiful, amazing garment and something that would be a terrific display. I'm going to try to get back from the camera enough for you to get the general impression of this, but you'll have to look at the pictures because it really is hard to do it justice. We are starting this at $95. This is another thing that is really unique. It's a one of a kind. I actually have a second one of these in a different style with the pants. So we're going to do this one first, learn about the market, and then decide how to sell the other one. So I'm excited to share it with someone else who appreciates the beauty and wonderment of this fantastic thing from another culture. And that brings us to our last item, which is similarly huge and similarly colorful and similarly unusual to see. And that is this. This is a giant 36-inch lilac swung vase by Ellie Smith from 1961. They only made the lilac color that year. It was a difficult color to make. It was very hard for them to get the mix right, and they took it out of production almost as fast as they put it in. When you do see these, you see smoothies. This one is actually hobnail, which is even more unusual, and it's so great the way it catches the light. Look how that texture, if you put this on a rotating stand with the light on it, it is just phenomenal and so big. There is as much as I can show you upright, and then we'll go this way, and you see what a phenomenal big boy this is. It is a really neat piece. These are extremely hard to find, and there's an interesting story about this one. I originally owned this 30 years ago. So I did a glass show, and nobody bought it, and they all thought it was very strange, and they didn't understand it. And a friend of mine said, "I love the color. I would like to buy that." And I said, "Well, how about $50? Because back then, swung vases, believe it or not, were hard to sell. Can you imagine? She took it for $50. She called me last month and said, "I bought a little piece of furniture. It needs to be in the space where the vase is. It's the only place it'll fit. Would you be willing to sell the vase for me?" And I said, "Why, yes, I would, but I think you'll be a little surprised at how they've appreciated." So I didn't tell her what I think it will sell for, but the average selling price on the smoothies is in the $1,000 range now. And this one is textured and even harder to find. So we're going to start this out at $9.99, but we do have a reserve on it because we know how special and unusual and hard to find this piece is. And it is going to be insured for shipping. And I think we're going to pay UPS to pack this one, because if they pack it, they will guarantee it gets there. And I don't think I have a box this big. I'm very, very excited to have this and very excited to see where it goes. And it really looks great with this outfit I'm wearing, don't you think? So I have sure had a lot of fun putting this together for all of you to enjoy. I hope that the people who end up with these items enjoy them as much as I've enjoyed putting them together and doing this deep dive for you. And we will report back to you with a what sold video and let you know how they did. So we will all learn something together. That's part of the reason I like doing these deeper dive videos. It's not just as a perk for members. It's not just as a way to bring the collectors who watch my channel wonderful things. It's also a way for us to all learn together what the market is for things that maybe we haven't seen or contemplated before.
If you enjoyed this video, check out this one. Also, click thumbs up to like this video and check the description for information about our Patreon, our memberships. We've got a lot of different levels with different perks and bonus videos and early content. Also, please do check out our website, theantiquenomad.com, for appraisal help. And we'll see you again for more adventures in the antique and vintage community soon. Bye for now.